So thank you very much to Wavefront and everyone for being here this morning. Thank you for asking me to come speak. So about 3 months ago, I had a conversation with the team, and they said, oh, we'd love you to do the opening keynote, and literally ran away and started writing this presentation. So this presentation is a culmination of about 3 months of wondering, what the hell is this world of Internet of Things? What is the new world? Where are we going? What does that really mean? What does it mean for us as humans? And what does it mean for solution providers and governments and the world at large? So I'm going to cover a number of different areas. Hopefully it will get you thinking. I'm going to be here for the next 2 days, so do come and talk to me. So really, I'm going to go through and take us on a little bit of a journey on how we got to today, and what does today mean, and then what does that mean for tomorrow. And it's a very positive future, but there's some warning signs as well. So I actually think I'm going to talk a little bit about the strange reality that we live in. I think that every single year up until 2017 has felt like a test run. The last 5 years particularly. A test run because technology is just maturing to today, where the minister was talking about self-driving cars and quantum computing. These things are happening and becoming very, very real for the first time. But I think today is also about that positive impact that we can all make on the world with what we do and using technology in the context of humanity and the people that live in cities and the people that are in Canada and beyond. But I'm going to do a little bit of a history lesson. Some of you may know some of this information, some of you may not. But I'd like to ground us in understanding how we got to 2017. Excuse me whilst I just pour some water. Because it's been a really interesting ride over the last 50 years. This is Douglas Engelbart. In 1968, he was in Stanford, and he developed a system. Stanford, working with Xerox PARC, he had the world's first mouse, trackpad, keyboard and computer screen, the world's first personal computer. He did something called the mother of all demos. You can go to YouTube, you can find the video there. Go and watch it, it's about 2 hours. It's really fascinating to see that. And now we see all of this technology as being normal, very much like the internet is today. Now, I got onto the internet in about 1992. I used to go to the internet club at Bournemouth University. And the internet club was full of the most fascinating people, as you can imagine. And I used to dial in through green screens to Norwegian universities to browse their catalog in their libraries. So it wasn't very sexy back in the day, but it was certainly the dawning of a new age. Within a couple of years, you had bands like Massive Attack and Radiohead with multimedia websites. Everyone had email addresses. Hotmail was going through the roof. It was a very, very exciting time. And then this guy sits in his dorm room about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and developed software that became one of the world's largest platforms. 1.87 billion people are on Facebook today. Is there anyone that's not on Facebook in the room? Yeah, that's the security people. When I go to security conferences, half the room goes, yeah, and then I talk about, did they sign the term, are they in there at all? What does that mean? It's actually pretty interesting. I love what Facebook's doing. What they did at F8 most recently is talk about the dawn of the age of the camera, and I think that relates very much to what we're going to talk about today with the Internet of Things. And then 2007, Steve Jobs stands up. I've got an internet communicator, a music player, and a phone. The iPhone, the first generation, came out 10 years ago. The iPhone 7 came out last year. I think we're going to see a massive dawn of a new age of augmented and mixed reality coming out with the iPhone 8. I don't think we're quite there with completely transparent screens yet, like I predicted last year, but we're almost there. But what's really interesting about mobile technology and cellular devices is that 6 billion people in the world have got access to this technology. That's more people in the world that have got access to this technology than have got access to clean running water. So say the United Nations. That's pretty fascinating. What's more important? I always like to think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Food, sex, warmth at the bottom, self-actualization at the top, and those memes that draw a little Wi-Fi right at the bottom, right? That connection has become a ubiquitous need for so many people in the world. And I think that ubiquitous need is driving forward economies at a scale that we've never seen before. But I like to just take a step back, and I thought, how can I add some humor on a Monday morning? Well, some of this is actually humorous, and some of this is downright scary to me. But I like to think of like the world as being full of digital phenomena, the things that happen because we've got this ubiquitous connection to the internet and to each other. So what are some of these things? Now, back in 1994, just after I joined the Internet Club, I read a book called Siberia by Douglas Rushkoff. And he talked about us being part of some of the world's most bizarre social experiments of the 20th century. And that was that we were going to be part of the network and part of the machine. Douglas Rushkoff writes a number of other books as well, Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus. He talks about the changing economy and technology. Fascinating reader. In fact, he opened my eyes so much that it really started me on this journey towards thinking about the future in very different ways. I actually think this is what freedom and democracy looks like in 2017. I don't know if you agree. Boomers. Now, boomers are super engaged today. Now, boomers are the most engaged people on Instagram, which is fascinating to me. Boomers will click, 75% of boomers will click through on an ad on Instagram. What, millennials don't have the power? Unfortunately, the millennials are the thumb tribes. There's this story, Justin Bieber goes to Central Park. Everyone was playing Pokemon Go, and he was in the middle of the crowd. Normally, kids would go crazy, right? They're too busy. The thumb tribes. I like to call them smombies. This is a real word. Smartphone zombies. Right? So Pokemon Go happened last year. I hacked into my iTunes account into the US, downloaded it onto my cell phone, and I walked 4 blocks without looking up. In a month, I actually also generated about $325 in mobile costs as well, and then I deleted it. I was using Snapchat as well. Now, what's really interesting with smombies, in the Netherlands, they were having a trouble where kids were getting run over because they were too busy looking down at their phones. So they put traffic lights into the sidewalk. I find this to be hugely fascinating. We're not trying to educate kids of how to be more aware in the world. We're just trying to map the world into how the kids are working. It's interesting. And then you go to restaurants and you want to know the heritage of the duck that you were just about to eat. This is Victor. He's a swearing, argumentative, Scrabble-playing robot. Why do we do why do we build these things? You've got Bitcoin that's almost as much as gold. It keeps flip-flopping. A virtual currency, a cryptocurrency that's sort of changing the world. Some hackers broke into the Associated Press Twitter account about 3 years ago and wrote this tweet, breaking 2 explosions in the White House and Barack Obama is injured. They wiped $2 billion off of US markets in an afternoon. So this ubiquity of connection and information is changing the world. And we know this, like fake news. The news infrastructure today is more terrifying than it ever has been. All the way back from like hieroglyphics, you know, the hobo code in the 1950s, and then to a world of emojis. We don't really know where to look for information or how to really express ourselves. Smiley face, right? But we're kind of at a point of sensory overload. Things are changing so drastically in our world, we don't know where to look, how to operate. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I did an experiment. I turned on all of the notifications on my smartphone. After 2 weeks, I became so anxious and so stressed out that I actually went to see my counselor and tried to decode what this was all about. And it was because the world is built in mechanisms to make us pay attention more than actually pay attention to the real world. This little flashing box in our pocket can be incredibly dangerous, can be incredibly powerful as well. Okay, a bit of history, a bit of strange phenomena, and you know what, I could have done a 5-hour presentation on strange phenomena, including the kid that taught himself how to drive on YouTube and drove his sister to go and get a Happy Meal at McDonald's. He was 8 years old. Anyway, data. Now, in the next few years, and very, very soon, data's going to grow tenfold. 4.4 zettabytes to 44 zettabytes in size. That's a phenomenal amount of data in the world. And why is that? Because we're surrounding ourselves by sensors and systems. We're connecting everything together. We're using more things. You know, self-driving car. All these things are just going to generate so much data and information. It's a huge potential for the world. And that huge potential is going to drive exponential growth. The law of accelerating returns tells us that we can look at all technologies that have come ahead of us, and we know that they're going to exponentially grow if they're a good idea, they solve problems in the world, because there'll be several people building off of one problem. And off those several people, there'll be several people building off of each of those several people. And the exponential growth means that you've got the hockey stick effect that we all aim to go after with the technologies that we build in the world. And that's actually meant that oil companies, banks, people like Walmart, they're not the most powerful companies in the world. This is the rank of the companies that are the most, have got the biggest market cap in North America. And what we see today is it's all tech companies. So Apple, Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook. These are the people that run the new world. These are the people that are the stalwart businesses, the foundational backbone of all society going forward. Billions and billions of users of their systems. If you took all of the employees of these companies, about 450,000 people work for these companies sort of in total, and you divided up the market cap, each employee would earn about $12 million. So we can see that power, we can see that opportunity. But with all that data and all that power, and I think that data is the new oil, right? It's the thing that makes the world go round. It's the profit center. It's the change. I think that we're actually drowning in information, but we're starving for wisdom. And this presentation today is a little bit about what does it mean to think about wisdom in the modern world once we've got all this connectivity, because that's where the hard work is. Now, there's lots of theories of information, data, information, knowledge, wisdom. What does that mean? How do we get from A to B? How do we take that raw data? I used to work in raw data and telco billing systems. And, once you've seen that, you know the horror, the true horror of the size of data and what you can do with it and the opportunity as well. But really, we have to understand that once we go from data and information, which is pretty consumable, reports, graphs, we're actually getting into a messier, more creative, harder one and far more discontinuous world. And when we go up to the level of wisdom, we get a huge amount of value out of that. But it's even harder to make that step upwards. And this leads me to talk about the Internet of Everything. Because I think the Internet of Things is a great term. I don't think it truly talks about the scale and the ubiquity that's going to come to the world in terms of what we're going to have connected. And I'm really looking forward to the next 2 days to find out so many more different perspectives about this. But I call this the Internet of Everything. So in 1969, a couple of boffins down in California connected a couple of these machines together. So across town, they started typing in L. The other guy was on the phone. I've received it. O. Yep, I got the O. Then it all fell down. So 2 characters, L-O, low, changed the world forever. 1969 was the birth of the internet in its true and most modern form. There's actually an amazing Werner Herzog movie called Lo and Behold that you should go and watch about this. I've never seen someone stump Elon Musk so much in my whole life. But not many people know what was the first Internet of Things device, right? Well, in fact, the very first Internet of Things device in the world was in 1990, so before the Internet became really viably available for many people in the world. And it was this Coke machine in Carnegie Mellon University. And do you know what's quite interesting about it? They could just monitor how full it was and how much money it had taken. Kind of sounds like the modern Internet of Things. The second thing that was connected in the Internet of Things was the M&M machine just next to it. I think the researchers had a certain priority for things in that world. And now we're at this incredible world where we've gone from like the first stage of the Industrial Revolution through to what people are calling the Fourth Industrial Revolution, cyber-physical machines connected to each other, M2M, Internet of Things, fully optimizing, looking after themselves, artificial intelligence. Fantastic. I'm incredibly excited about this world. It's going to create efficiencies. It's going to cause a lot of challenges. As economies grow, are the employment and the health and happiness of the citizens going to grow with that as well? And we're seeing the Internet of Things grow into a huge powerhouse. So Cisco think that there's going to be about 50 billion devices by 2020. We've got such a huge ecosystem. I don't even think this slide really even shows how many different companies in the world are producing Internet of Things devices. I think there's more and more every single day coming into the marketplace. And research and development institutes and universities, places like Wavefront, and very large companies are driving that momentous change in the world. There's a lot of investment happening. And this is a really great thing. Everyone from Intel and GE leading the charge, and then Andreessen Horowitz and a number of other VCs really pushing the corners of what can be done and really believing in what the new world can be. And the economic impact is huge. They actually think, this is McKinsey, $6.2 trillion US dollar impact until 2025. We're talking trillions of dollars with these technologies that we're building. This is why we're here today. We're trying to work out the map of how to get to that, not only for us as businesses, but for the society that uses them. And it's actually really interesting. By 2020, McKinsey actually estimates that total market is going to go up from 900 million in 2015 to 3.7 billion in 2020. Crazy. And then GE is super bullish on, of course it is. All of its devices can be connected, right? Amazing. The entire market they expect to top 60 trillion in the next 15 years. I don't think society quite knows what to expect and what's going to be coming. But it's starting to get some hints and tips from some of the largest companies in the world that are introducing things in very small and surreptitious ways. And you know what? I was thinking about this. It's like, okay, if I was going to implement this, if I was going to think about this in the world, what's a framework to think about the Internet of Things? And it's like, if it was just a thing in the corner like a personal computer, it'd be easy. It'd have a defined universe and a defined purpose. We'd be able to understand exactly what to do with it. I think once you set things free, you're going to be able to do fantastical and amazing things. In fact, things that you haven't actually understood what could be done with those things in the Internet of Everything. And this is why it's complex. Things and people and data. And you start mixing these together, you understand that people and things, that's the homes and the streets. People and data, that's mobile connectivity. Things and data, that's around business activity, optimization. And then you can understand the other intersections, people-to-people communications and protocols. You've got machine-to-machine protocols as well. And then in the middle, you've got to work out how the hell does this work together in a way that benefits everyone. But what's interesting, as we head towards this utopian world of connectivity, the way that we have relationships with technology inexorably changes. The way that we understand and we walk around the world in its entirety is going to fundamentally change, and we have to change our habits and behaviors to fit within that, as well as that world having to fit towards us. We're going to have to be aware of many different devices every single day. It's interesting, if you look at Generation Z, they're the younger guys than millennials. They've got an average of 5 devices versus 3 devices that millennials have got. But then you've got hundreds of devices surrounding you as well, and the home's going to have more and more home hardware and software coming into it. We're going to have to work out how we can use it without it distracting us and changing the way that we operate with other human beings. It worries me greatly to understand how the dynamics of culture and society are being fundamentally changed by technology, and I try and bring people back to understanding that we're people and we need to operate as people. But I think what we need to do, I think this is going to be something that the industry is going to have to focus on, is making the internet disappear. It kind of seems stupid to me that we look at these rectangles in our hands. It fundamentally changes the way that we are. I think that if we walked around in a world where everything just happened the way that it should happen, optimized to who we are in our place in the world, that seems like a better place. I like to think about the film Her. If you've seen the film Her, this is Theodore, who's heartbroken. He installed an AI called Samantha on his smartphone, had a relationship. He didn't look at the screen. He walked around. He was like talking to her. They fell in love. It's fantastic. That idea of ubiquitous connection, the fact that your eyes and your voice and your actions are the things that control the world, is incredibly interesting to me as a futurist. And I'd like to introduce this idea of calm technology. So again, the really smart people down in Xerox PARC in the early 2000s started talking about how we've created this world of buzzing and beeping machines and, you know, the crackberry syndrome and all the viral and double viral loops that like demand our attention all of the time. Devices have to be ready for our input. We don't have to be ready for its push towards us. This is the idea behind calm technology. It's calming in the exact opposite way that receiving group chat notifications on your phone is not. It's just a relaxed way of understanding and using the technologies around us. And this leads me to start thinking about the future of the interface in the context of the Internet of Everything. And I think this is about voices and faces. You've got companies like Microsoft and Apple and Samsung that are taking the mobile personal helper to the next level. In fact, last year, Samsung acquired a company called Viv that had built Siri previously for Apple. And it was an incredible interface that had a much higher level of artificial intelligence, linguistic recognition of grammar, and built an entire platform that could lead you to, in very few words, achieve any of the tasks that you actually needed to achieve in the world. No clicking, no awkward, you wouldn't even have to look at the screen necessarily, right? And Microsoft's driving it forward. I think that Apple's going to come up with something very serious this year in this space, so I think we should watch out as the camera and the voice becomes the preeminent user experience. And then I looked at the CES show earlier this year. It's like, oh, I always look at the technology and there's like, it's always bigger TVs and some drones. I'm not very excited about most of it. I think the most exciting part of CES this year was the thing that was not at CES. Amazon did not have a stall at CES talking about Amazon Alexa, which is its home helper. Right? It's a little tube that sits in the corner room. My next door neighbor's got one. It's ubiquitous. It listens to you. It's always on. It can sing you country and western songs if you want to. Now, what's really interesting was that Amazon wasn't at CES, but its platform was built into dozens of the software and hardware products that were actually available. This is really interesting. If you remember my sort of list of companies that are the most valuable companies in North America, well, I think that Amazon and a lot of other analysts are saying within sort of 10 years, it's going to be the world's first trillion-dollar company. I'm going to talk a little bit about what they've got going on. So last week, in addition to Alexa, which is already a slightly creepy situation, you've now got an evolution of that, and it's called the Amazon Echo Look. That can actually tell you if what you're wearing on the day is actually looking good. I'm not joking. So Amazon are like, okay, what should we do with this? It's like we've got this great camera and AI. It's like, oh, we'll just tell people that they look really, really great. Why? Because that good feeling ushers in a way that surveillance doesn't really worry us too much, right? It's true. You know, Mark Andreessen says the internet is a magic box. They don't want you to understand. Just use the lovely things. The lovely things will do really good for you in your world. And then if you go down to Seattle, I think they've just shut it down because they've done the experiment. They opened a grocery market called Amazon Go. And Amazon Go is really interesting. You can walk in, scan your phone, take anything you want off the shelf, put it into your bag, and just leave. They called it just walk out technology. I used to call that shoplifting when I was a kid. But what's really interesting about this is it's a culmination of so many things that we're seeing happening in the Internet of Everything. They've linked their inventory management system in the cloud, cameras and sensors, Wi-Fi, RFIDs into the store, and they've got an app. And what's the biggest part of the product? It's you. We are the product in so many of the different situations in the modern world. And I don't mind that, but I certainly want a choice of how my data and my input is actually used, and there's the problem. And that needs to be worked out. And then you've got the evolution of robots. I get hugely excited about robotics. There's so many more robots coming into the world that is changing the landscapes of manufacturing and other things. Foxconn, which is one of the companies that builds a lot of the Apple iPhones, is going to replace 60,000 people in its workforce this year alone in one of its factories with robots, completely. There's going to be changes that are far wide-ranging and sweeping into some of those countries that we look to for cheap manufacturing, because we want it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Robots can work 24/7, 365, and never get tired. They might need an oiling once in a while. Right? But what's really interesting, coming back to North America, General Motors has connected about a quarter of its 30,000 factory robots to the internet. And now it's reaping the benefits of that machine-to-machine communication. That's really interesting to me, that we can optimize the operations that are already in practice. In fact, when I was a management consultant, we used to do outsourcing and to India and manufacturing to China and this, and it's like we save lots of money, customer service to somewhere else. And now companies are starting to realize that with these new technologies, they can bring the manufacturing capabilities back to their countries. And it's not really as a stimulus to try and hire more people. It just brings it closer to home and closer to the designers that are actually building the products and more control. So Adidas is starting to do this. And it's just started a new factory in Germany, and now it's got 160 staff that manage way, way more robots than that to do its sneakers. So there's this massive untapped market in everything from hospitals and offices, retail stores, and beyond. And robots are going to fundamentally come into our world and change how we interact with people and robots and what rights that they have and the ethics that surrounds everything. And this brings us into thinking about what I call smart cities. The Internet of Everything is going to really come to pass by being within the cities that we operate in. Now, the smart part of this is in parentheses, because I think that we have to understand that cities are cities, and they have people in them. So I'm going to do a little bit of a history lesson about smart cities as well. But the market for smart cities is going to be huge. They think that it's going to be a $3.48 trillion market by 2026. I'm very excited to see some of the people that work for various cities, like the City of Toronto, City of Vancouver, talk later on, and I think we should be chatting to them about what they think about smart cities as well. But why is this such a huge prevalent thing? Well, it's going to change the way that we manage energy, transportation and governance, security, construction, clean technologies and services. It's going to make the world a better place for the people living in those cities. But I'd like to take you back to 1854 and the cholera epidemic in Soho in London. Why is this important in smart cities? Well, we know that smart cities are foundationally smart through the data that they produce, the information, the knowledge, and the wisdom that's actually derived from that. Well, back in 1854, Soho is gripped by this cholera epidemic. And John Snow created a life-saving map to help people stop dying from drinking certain water. Now, he figured out the disease was actually spread by water than by bad air, which was the widely held thought. And he actually traced it to like one single pump for the water supply and fixed the whole problem. But then before that, he actually mapped out exactly where all the water was flowing, and then he could work out where the problem was. Fundamentally, I think this is what the Internet of Things can do today. But all the way back then, it's a human problem. And it was a biological, environmental problem as well. But, thinking about where we are today, we're in the age of computing. Now, what do we do? How do we think if we look at the city as if it's a computer platform, as if it's already connected to the internet, and how that actually works? And it's so interesting. I just chatted to Jim. I was like, Jim, you mentioned Bristol a whole bunch of times. I'm going to talk about Bristol. I grew up in the southwest of England, 40 miles south of Bristol. Hugely important as a shipping port. Lots of history. There's a huge amount of businesses, academic institutions. It's a vibrant, vibrant city. They've got a particular initiative called Bristol is Open right now. That's one of the world's leading capabilities in smart cities. They dug up the streets and put a massive, massive data pipe down. Then they connected all of their emergency services, universities, libraries, and as many businesses that wanted to be part of that, and banks. And now the city is experimenting with understanding what it means to have that connectivity, near real-time data flow around the city, and how it can optimize itself so it actually benefits the citizens and businesses even more than ever. And the second example I like to talk about is Chicago. I get excited about Chicago for 3 different reasons. One, I went there last year and I was working with an ad agency on the future of retail for one of their clients. I remember standing there, I'm like, this is where Batman lives. So I get really excited about that. Number 2, if you go to Chicago, go and eat pizza. Trust me, it's a life-changing experience. And number 3, because I'm a nerd, I like the array of things. And the array of things are these boxes, very cheap boxes, that you can strap onto poles and places and buildings around the city. And it looks at environmental sensors, air quality. They look at a whole bunch of different ways that the city's operating. And it brings it back into an open data infrastructure. And academics and city researchers and the people within organizations can exploit that and use that to create more products and create reports and create information flow and wisdom, ultimately, for people living in Chicago. And my friend here from Catalonia was very excited about this last night. Was excited to find out that I'm going to talk a little bit about Barcelona. So I was writing an article for a paper in the UK. I started looking at all these really cool places around like Songdo and whatever, places in China doing these amazing things with the Internet of Things. But what I found interesting was back in the day, when the recession hit, Barcelona knew it had to make some changes in how it ran the city. It was losing money. It was really tough times for everyone in Europe, certainly. So what it did is it actually invested in infrastructure. They created a Smart City Barcelona task force and really worked out that there was a number of different things in the city that they could change. They identified 12 different areas to address, initiated like 22 different programs and dozens of distinct projects. And what they got out of that after a number of years was a hugely optimized city. And they're doing amazing things with like smart blocks and yeah, there's lots of great urban planning as well as the technology to going into the streets. I mean, they put all of these different technologies in and saved millions of dollars through smart lighting, optimization of how water flow and wastage is treated. They increased parking revenues by $50 million. I imagine the people that live in Barcelona aren't very happy about that. And I kind of wonder what they were doing before, right? But they created 47,000 new jobs. And I think Barcelona is one of these beacons in the smart city world that really show that something very human and very focused can actually change how a city operates. And it's about investment, and that's good for us. But I think that it's really interesting to think about going beyond the technology we throw there. I think the designers and people that are living in cities still want the cities to feel human. I don't know if you've ever seen this hashtag, I see faces. We walk around the world and we see all sorts of faces on the machinery that we build. I also love a number of these different projects as well. The idea that we can put art into the streets and connected devices creates a warm human emotional connection. I think that powers a city more than anything else. The anthropomorphic way that we put personality onto things is going to be something that continues. It's why we give our products cute names. It's why we have faces and avatars. We have characters representing it. It's why we use influencers. It's why someone actually gave Tower Bridge a personality. In London, it's got a live Twitter feed, and you can go and see this. I'm closing off. The MV Dixie Queen has passed down the river scene. It's like, thanks for letting me know that. That's really useful. See you later, Tower Bridge. And when you see Tower Bridge next, try not to think about this as a personality. In Bristol, again, they started this project called Hello Lamppost. Every single thing in the city, so it could be the old postal boxes, it could be the manhole covers, they've all got a number, serial number. You could text a message to the serial number with Hello Lamppost and have a conversation with it. And then you could leave behind your conversation, and it would ask you about its surroundings. So I could go to a lamppost like 3 hours after Jim talks to the lamppost, and he goes, oh yeah, this last guy said that I was a good-looking, red-faced boy. What do you think? I'm like, well, okay. I don't know what Jim thinks, but I think you look pretty good. But this idea of having interactions in our environments is interesting. It's so interesting that this German artist created this thing. It's called the Fullometer. And what it did was it took random pictures of German people's faces in this town, and it would change a massive emoji on this lighthouse clock tower to reflect the absolute mood of the city. And what they found that over time was happiness beget happiness. The town got happier. And when the town was sad, people went out onto the streets and tried to make it happy again. I love this. You should go and watch the video. It's a small city. I love Europe for the fact that they take the most random cities and do wildly experimental electronic art. Okay, let's come back. Let's stop. Let's come back to what we really need to talk about again, which is the Internet of Everything, right? I like the divulging into art and humanity a little bit. Privacy and security. Al Gore talked about privacy as a privilege. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where everything everywhere will soon be continuously recorded. We're going to be completely surrounded by things actually telling us and telling other government agencies and companies exactly what we're doing in the world. Advances in computer science, computer vision, AI mean that this is all going to be usable at scale. If you think about a self-driving car, it captures terabytes of data in real time every minute. And it'd be able to tell who we are on the streets by the gait of our walk and how tall we are, even though it's using LiDAR and not actual visual cameras. And do you remember this a few years ago? People walking around with Google Glass. Thank goodness that we don't see this anymore, but back in the day, people were being punched in the face and being told to get lost because you're recording me. And now one of the biggest IPOs of the recent times, it was Snap. And everyone now we're like, wow, you recorded me, great, let me pose and do something. Is that going to be on the internet? How many people are going to see me? So in a period of about 4 or 5 years, society's changed to this sort of much more relaxed, I'm okay with the surveillance going on in the world. Because, it's fun now. Because that's what people want you to think. We still need to be serious about what that means. Just talked about self-driving cars and the mapping that they do. It's going to be ubiquitous. They actually think that 35% of the cars on the road will be self-driving in the next few years. And by 2030, about 100% of the cars on the road will have self-driving system mechanisms. That's a lot of data. I love this quote. We're sleepwalking into surveillance capitalism, which is evolving into data and computation driven by authoritarianism. One cool service at a time. Keep it cool. It's okay. Everyone's going to be okay with everything. But then this happened last year, and you're probably all aware of this. In October last year, someone released a botnet that exploited Internet of Things devices to run DDoS attacks on some of the world's largest websites. And it hit everywhere, all over the world. Suddenly, the hackers had tapped into the idea that humans are fairly stupid when they connect devices to the internet. And this botnet wasn't even very smart. It didn't even break or hack into these devices. It just used system admin standard passwords and exploited those devices that just weren't secure at all. And this incident took down some of the largest websites in the world: Netflix, Twitter, Spotify, Reddit, CNN, PayPal, Pinterest, and Fox News. This is not small fry. It also took down The Guardian, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal. And this was just code dropped onto GitHub. And this code's ubiquitous in the world. And things can change. Then I love looking at other ways that these devices, we've got to be aware of the fact that you can actually hack into pacemakers. I think it was Newt Gingrich that was taken back into surgery when he took a very senior level in government, and they hack-proofed his pacemaker. Insulin pumps. Want to hack into an insulin pump? I think we just need to be aware that there's backdoors into what we're building. And most recently, WikiLeaks did the Vault 7 launch, and they said the CIA has got a suite of tools that can break into anything. Android, iOS, OS X, and Linux computers. In fact, there's 2 scary stories. One is Weeping Angel. Weeping Angel actually turned smart TVs into listening surveillance devices as standard. So it was snooping on everyone. And they also talked about doing assassinations through self-driving cars. But I won't go into that too much. But this brings me back to what the new digital economy is. Because that's what the talk was, and they said, tell us what the new digital economy is. The new digital economy is the internet of everything. Infrastructure, big data in the cloud, sensors, cameras, artificial intelligence, security. It's a shopping list. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to build infrastructure that can make the world a better place. And I think that's what we're going to learn about in the next 2 days. But what's really interesting, that if you look at the value of that to the world, is that the value to society is greater than the value to business. And I think we have to have that perspective. We're nearly there. But I'd like to pause. Because at the heart of technology, and the zeros and ones, the AI, the data infrastructure, the Wi-Fi flying around the world, the eventual world of light fi as well, we've got humans. Because do you know what hasn't changed for hundreds of years, thousands of years? Is that who we are. We've had stories today from 1854 all the way through to the present day, right? And that leads us into thinking about the future. And when I think about the future, I always ask myself the question, how do these systems fundamentally change who we are as humans? You can't change us. We can change towards that, but we have to work culturally how things are going to emerge. The things that we try and operate with in this life are sixfold. Certainty and variety, significance, connection and love, so important. Growth and contribution are the things that will drive us. And at the heart of the systems that we build, and the designers, the software developers, the systems and software architects need to think about these 6 things more importantly than anything else, and say, how are we building these into our systems? How are we being responsible? How do ethics and morals play into this? And is the actions that we're doing actually changing the way that the world's going to operate in a positive way? And I think that this is what the presentation was about today. I think it was about ubiquity, wisdom, ethics and responsibility. I think more importantly, the whole presentation today was about love. Love for ourselves in the context of technology and the Internet of Everything. This is about solutions for people. I'd love to have many conversations with you over the next couple of days. I think that we're going to see lots of presentations that are going to talk about how people are impacted and solutions are realized into the world. Welcome to the future. That was the digital revolution. Thank you very much. And I think we got about 4 minutes for Q&A as well. I think I'm allowed that. Does anyone have any questions? Question at the front down here, Perry. Thank you.
You sort of alluded in the beginning that there's going to be some challenges, as we all know it. Maybe you can comment about what you think is going to happen with jobs.
This is the question I get asked more than anything else. AI and algorithms are going to remove a huge amount of jobs. The Brookfield Institute in Ryerson over here, I'm actually meeting with them in a couple of days. They say that 42% of Canadian jobs will be automated in the next 20 years. What's going to happen? We'll actually go back and look at some historical examples. When the spinning jenny came into factories and took away the jobs from the people spinning yarn, those people just became designers and seamstresses, right? They didn't just disappear. When you actually think about the more modern world, farms in the US had about 40% of the American workforce on farms in 1905. It's only about 2.7% of people today. And do you know what? The jobs that came out of the back of that, people are now earning more money, there's more diversity. We're never going to stop creating different kinds of jobs. The future is going to be about the human and the machine. We're going to be working with technologies. It's artificial intelligence is one phrase. I like to think of it as intelligence augmentation, what we do with the intelligence that we're given. And do you know what? People aren't going to be flipping burgers or driving vehicles. They're not going to be doing these low-value tasks. They're going to be knowledge workers. I think that that's going to bolster the world.